Welcome to Frame Dropped. Virtual reality has become bigger than a lot of people have expected. And whether you love it or just haven't tried it, see what I did there? VR is slowly becoming an integral part of modern gaming and entertainment as a whole. But what was before the PSVR, Oculus Rift and HTC Vive? Today we ask the question, who did it first? Okay, so there were a lot of different technologies that use a kind of virtual reality through the ages. And because the modern use of it in gaming and VR motion picture is still in its infancy, it's often hard to define the exact predecessors to today's technology. But don't worry, we will try anyways. Just be aware that we won't touch on every single VR device that has been developed in the past. So the current virtual reality headsets that are available on the mainstream market are the big three. The PlayStation VR, that uses visible tracking lights and as of right now is exclusively working with the PlayStation 4. Then we have the HTC Vive and the Oculus Rift, both of which use an infrared tracking method and only work with a PC that is powerful enough to support the systems. The first of these headsets was the Oculus Rift, which launched in March of 2016, although the development on the PlayStation VR might have started even earlier than the work on the other systems. But if that would be the advent of VR, we couldn't have made a whole video on the topic. So what came before that? In 1999, Philip Rosedale formed the company Linden Lab, which developed early VR hardware. They struggled, however, to produce a mainstream commercial headset as their prototype was formed out of steel and required several computer monitors that users had to wear on their shoulders. But before that, the arguably most famous early VR hardware was released to the public in 1995, the Nintendo Virtual Boy. The Virtual Boy was a 32-bit standalone video game console that bears similarities to modern VR headsets, but instead of strapping it around your head, you had to put the console on your table and place your head against the eyepiece in order to see the notorious monochrome red 3D display.
There's only one problem. It needs your eyes. Virtual Boy, see it now in 3D.
Nintendo only sold about 770,000 units worldwide, and therefore it was widely regarded as a commercial failure. This led Nintendo to discontinue the hardware less than a year later, and therefore only 22 games ever released for the Nintendo Virtual Boy. A fact that might not be as well known is that Sega also developed its own VR technology called Sega Vr.
It makes me feel like anything is possible.
Which was scheduled to release a year before Nintendo's headset. The Sega Vr was quite impressive for its time. It had LCD screens and integrated stereo headphones and could even track head movement. But sadly, it never made it out of the arcades and into the living rooms. Sega claimed that the reason for that was because the reality effect was too realistic. But that doesn't sound like PR speech at all.
It's a gyro-telescopic satellite link-up hookup thing.
However, there were reports of testers developing strong motion sickness and headaches, which might be a more plausible reason why Sega terminated the project. A more sophisticated VR system called Virtuality launched in 1991. The system featured not only headsets, but also exoskeleton gloves. Yes, you heard right. And you could buy one yourself for only $73,000 US. Because of that, it was mainly used in arcade centers. Moving on, let's travel to the 1980s. Here the term virtual reality was popularized, to be more specific by the company VPL Research and its founder Jean Lanier in 1985. VPL developed a full-body VR outfit capable of measuring arm and leg movement in 1989. As cool as it looks, this suit was only used in order to capture data for specific research purposes. Before that, Atari founded their own research division for virtual reality in 1982, but it was closed only 2 years later because of the video game crash. Alright, so you're asking, please Mr. Frame Dropped, cut the crap and finally tell us about the earliest VR systems ever made. So here you have it. The earliest VR system that is probably relevant to modern VR headsets was the Large Expanse Extra Perspective, or LEAP system. Developed in 1979 by Eric Howlett, this system created a widescreen stereoscopic image that apparently felt quite convincing for the users. 6 years later, the system was redesigned by NASA for their first virtual reality installation at their Ames Research Center. The Leap is the first system that modern VR headsets are based on, and that therefore had a significant impact on the field of gaming. And if we try to go back even further in time, the topic can get quite blurry, as most systems and prototypes were developed for the military, in medicine or other non-commercial uses. But let's do it anyway and try to find the first VR system ever made. You might think that something as futuristic as a PlayStation VR headset couldn't have roots that date back several decades, but that's exactly the case here. The first approach to virtual reality that we were able to find dates back to 1962. Morten Heilig built a prototype that he dubbed the Sensorama. The patent for the device states the following: a telescopic television apparatus for individual use. The spectator is given a complete sense of reality, in example moving three-dimensional images which may be in color with 100% peripheral vision, binaural sound, sense and air breezes. The Sensorama Prototype was made along 5 short films, and what's even more impressive is that it was made before digital computing existed, so the device was completely mechanical. It's kind of cool to see that all these visions about immersive VR, 3D headsets and exoskeletons were topics of the 1960s and the 1990s, as well as they are topics today, although the affordable technology wasn't there yet. And to be fair, it still isn't now, but it gives us hope for the future. So what do you think? Is VR here to stay? Did you know that there were so many and especially early prototypes of virtual reality devices? Leave your thoughts in the comments below and please subscribe if you want to see more videos. Until then, see you next time.